The sky over Lagos hung heavy with gray clouds, mirroring the storm brewing in Adaobi's heart as she hurried past the row of street hawkers near Yaba Market. The smell of roasted corn and wet earth clung to the air, but none of it mattered to her, not with the weight of another arranged date awaiting her back home. At 25, she had become the trophy her parents were eager to auction off to the wealthiest bidder. Born into affluence, with a mother who sat on boards and a father who dined with governors, Adaobi had always been groomed for a life of influence. But today, in her frustration, she escaped the suffocating expectations and wandered into a part of town she was never allowed to explore. It was there near the bus terminal, seated under a makeshift umbrella with a small notepad and a beat-up Bible, that she met him, the man who would alter her life forever. He looked unbothered by the noise of the city, quietly sketching something with a charcoal pencil, his clothes stained and torn, his hair messy. But his eyes burned with something deeper than poverty. Wisdom, peace, pain. Adaobi watched him, half in curiosity, half in pity. What kind of man could sit so calmly in this chaos? "Can I see what you're drawing?" she asked, more out of boredom than intent. The man looked up, surprised anyone even noticed him, and offered a slow, soft smile that revealed perfectly aligned white teeth, an oddity in a man who looked like he hadn't eaten in days. "It's nothing special. Just people who walked past me," he said, showing her a rough sketch of a child selling oranges, an old man asleep beside a pile of tires, and, shockingly, her. "You sketched me," she gasped. "I sketch what I feel, not just what I see," he replied. There was something magnetic about him. The way he listened without interrupting. How he spoke gently like someone raised with manners, not the streets. They talked for nearly 2 hours before Adaobi realized how much time had passed. "I'm Chuka," he said as she rose to leave. "Adaobi," she whispered back. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about him. A homeless man, thoughtful, gifted, and kind. Something about that made her chest ache and flutter all at once. Over the next 2 weeks, Adaobi returned, again and again. They'd sit under that same umbrella, talking about life, the world, and dreams they both had. Chuka never asked for money, never pitted himself. In fact, he challenged her in ways no man ever had. He told her that love was more about character than comfort. That true wealth was in how you loved others. Each word from him dismantled the carefully constructed values her parents instilled in her. One rainy afternoon, soaked to the skin, she found him sheltering under the umbrella, shivering but still drawing. Without hesitation, she removed her own shawl and wrapped it around him. Chuka looked at her with tears in his eyes. "You don't see a homeless man, do you?" he whispered. Adaobi stepped closer and cupped his cheek. "I see a man the world would regret ignoring." That day he dropped the drawing pad, took her hand, and with a trembling voice said, "Marry me, Adaobi. Let's write a new story, one not written by your parents or mine." And though it sounded crazy, she said yes. The sound of Adaobi's heels echoed through the mansion's marble floors as she entered her parents' living room, soaked from the rain, but glowing with an odd kind of joy. Her mother, Ngozi, looked up from her glass of wine and narrowed her eyes. "Where have you been?" "You've missed lunch with Chief Udoka's family. Do you know how disrespectful that is?" Adaobi removed her wet shawl and replied, "I was with someone I love." Her father, Chief Maduka, rose from his chair slowly, his gaze suddenly sharp. "Love," he repeated. "Who?" Adaobi hesitated, then with trembling lips, she said, "His name is Chuka. He's kind, intelligent, and he's currently without a home." The silence that followed was thunderous. Her mother gasped audibly. "You're telling us you've been fraternizing with a street rat," she snapped. "Adaobi, have you lost your mind?" Her father's voice thundered. "You will end this madness now. You are not marrying a nobody. Not while you bear my name." But Adaobi stood tall, defying the rage. "Then I'll stop bearing your name," she said quietly. "I'm marrying Chuka." Ngozi clutched her chest like she'd been slapped, her face twisting in disgust. "You would shame this family? Destroy everything we've worked for," she shrieked. Adaobi turned to her father with tears in her eyes. "You taught me to value men who can provide. But Chuka provides me peace, love, and dignity. Things I never felt growing up in this cold palace. Chief Maduka roared, "Get out of my house. Take your nonsense elsewhere. If you marry that boy, you are dead to me." The words sliced deeper than she anticipated. But even as pain tightened her chest, she whispered, "Then consider me dead." With that, Adaobi walked out, her mother screaming curses behind her, her father slamming a glass of whiskey into the wall. Outside, under the same rain that soaked her soul, she found Chuka waiting under their umbrella. When he saw the tears in her eyes, he didn't ask questions. He simply opened his arms. And there, on a busy Lego street, Adaobi ran into the arms of the man the world would call homeless, but she now called home. They spent the night in a small corridor behind Mom and Ketchi's buka, wrapped in one another, cold but not alone. The pain of rejection stabbed through Adaobi's chest like fire. She had never gone a day without house helps, 3 meals, and credit alerts. But here she was, choosing a man who had none of that. "Are you sure?" Chuka asked quietly, holding her close. "They'll never take you back now." Adaobi nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything. Love like yours is worth losing the world for." Chuka looked away, his jaw tight. "Then I swear on my life, Adaobi, one day I'll give you a life so rich they'll choke on their pride." Adaobi didn't know what he meant by that, but she clung to the promise like oxygen. In the darkness, they planned their wedding, not with designers or planners, but with paper rings and whispered vows. That night marked the death of Adaobi, the pampered princess. In her place rose Adaobi, the woman who chose love over luxury. The next morning brought a harsh sun and a harsher reality. Adaobi woke up with her head on Chuka's chest, the hard concrete beneath them bruising her skin. Her silk blouse, once imported from Italy, was stained from the street dust. Her designer shoes were missing, stolen while they slept. Mom and Ketchi, the food vendor who'd seen them from afar, brought them 2 bowls of hot pap. "I don't have much," she said softly, "but you two remind me of something I lost a long time ago, love that's real." Adaobi thanked her with trembling hands. It was the first time anyone had offered her something without expecting status in return. Chuka offered to clean up the surrounding gutters in exchange for a small room behind the buka. Mama and Ketchi agreed, and by evening, the room was theirs. It smelled of kerosene and damp wood, but it was better than the street. Adaobi knelt on the hard floor and whispered, "Thank you, God. It's not much, but we're together." Back in the mansion, Ngozi paced restlessly. Her daughter's rebellion had become the talk of their elite social circle. "She humiliated us," she cried. "She left for a beggar." Chief Maduka, however, was oddly silent, staring at Adaobi's childhood photo on the mantel. "She's just like her mother, stubborn," he muttered, but his eyes betrayed the sting of loss. Still, pride bound his lips shut. When a distant cousin suggested they find Adaobi and drag her back, Ngozi snapped, "Let her suffer. She chose a dog, let her eat with them too." Meanwhile, Adaobi's phone was cut off. Her bank accounts were frozen. Every attempt to call her relatives or friends ended in rejection. Her family had moved fast to erase her from their world. But Adaobi didn't let her tears define her. She began to assist Mom and Ketchi in washing plates and cleaning tables. She scrubbed bent-over sewage and ate from scraps. But Chuka's warm gaze at night reminded her why she had chosen this path. Chuka, too, worked odd jobs, carrying heavy loads at the market, washing cars, and even singing for coins in the evenings. People mocked them. "See the Ajibutter Pekin turned pepper seller." Some laughed. Others warned Chuka, "She go leave you once hunger slap her." But Adaobi stayed. She stayed when it rained and the roof leaked onto their mattress. She stayed when she miscarried their first child and bled for hours in silence. She stayed when she fell sick and had to be treated by a roadside nurse with herbs. Each day was a battle, and each day they clung tighter. But the pain slowly sharpened them into stronger people. On one such night, Adaobi looked at the stars and whispered, "One day they'll see. One day they'll wish they never threw us away." And Chuka, watching her from the shadows, clenched his fists. The time was drawing near, the moment his true identity would bring down mountains and raise her name above those who spat on it. They settled into a rhythm that most would call unbearable. But for Adaobi and Chuka, it became the heartbeat of their love story. Every morning, they woke before dawn, boiled sachets of water over firewood, and cleaned themselves beside a small gutter. Adaobi tied a scarf over her head and wore second-hand clothes donated by Mom and Kechi. Gone were her diamond earrings and silk wigs. But what remained was the fire in her soul. She walked from buka to buka, offering to wash plates for 10 naira, some days getting insulted, some days getting fed. In the evenings, she helped Chuka sell his sketches to students and passers-by. He drew portraits for 200 naira, sometimes less. His fingers were gifted, and his art told stories that melted even the most hardened buyers. Adaobi watched him with pride. "You draw like someone who's lived many lives," she said once. Chuka just smiled faintly. "Maybe I have," he replied. Still, the hardship took its toll. There were days they went without food, days Adaobi wept from cramps and hunger, and days when men tried to take advantage of her. Chuka once fought off a group of thugs who tried to corner her near the public restroom. He came back with bruises and a swollen lip. Adaobi cried as she cleaned his wounds, guilt stabbing her heart. "You could leave, Chuka. Go find your family. You don't have to suffer because of me." Chuka cupped her face, blood still dripping from his chin. "Adaobi, I left that life for a reason. If suffering with you is the price for peace, I'll pay it over and over again." That night, she realized something she hadn't before. Chuka was hiding something deeper than poverty. There was a sadness he carried, a scar she hadn't yet touched. But she respected his silence. For now, survival was enough. The small room behind the buka eventually became home, complete with a broken fan, one mattress, and drawings on the wall. Adaobi decorated the space with plastic flowers from a roadside bin, lit a candle each night, and prayed. Still, some nights were unbearable. She missed her siblings. Her younger brother had always adored her. She missed the feel of clean sheets and the scent of lavender baths. But every time she considered giving up, Chuka's touch reminded her she was no longer the little girl who needed a silver spoon. She was a woman with a love that defied the odds. She looked into his eyes one night and whispered, "When we finally win, they'll never believe we started here." Chuka took her hand and nodded. "And when we do, I'll make the world know your name, Adaobi. I'll make them regret the day they turned their backs on you." The first time Mama and Kechi saw Adaobi kneeling in the mud, her once delicate hands scrubbing greasy pots, something tugged at her soul. She had known many girls who fell from grace, but none with the quiet dignity of this one. Most former rich girls either ran mad or ran home, but this one stayed, scrubbing, smiling, surviving. One evening after a long day of work, Mom and Kechi sat beside Adaobi on a wooden bench, handing her a small bowl of beans and fried plantain. "Eat, my daughter," she said gently. "Your eyes are too sharp to be this sunken." Adaobi hesitated, overwhelmed. "Thank you, Mama. I don't know how to repay you." The older woman chuckled, wiping her sweaty brow. "You've already paid me with your respect. You don't act like you're too big to fetch water or sweep." From that day, Mom and Kechi gave them access to a small unused storage room beside her buka. It was dusty, filled with broken chairs and old plates, but to Adaobi and Chuka, it felt like heaven. Mom and Kechi began to treat Adaobi like a daughter. She taught her how to cook street-style jollof, how to price tomatoes in bulk, and how to protect herself from sly market boys. "This street no be your friend," she warned. "But if you respect he go teach you sense." Adaobi absorbed it all. Every morning, she rose with Mom and Kechi, prepared coolers of rice and stew, and helped serve customers under the hot sun. People began to notice her. Some pitied her, others whispered cruelly, but the woman she was becoming silenced them all. The same girl who once couldn't fry an egg now sold akra on the roadside. Meanwhile, Chuka continued drawing, his skills attracting attention from university students and event planners who wanted custom artwork. He still refused to reveal where he learned it. "Self-taught," he always replied, dodging every question about his past like it carried a curse. One quiet night, after a long day, Mom and Kechi sat with Chuka outside the buka, while Adaobi slept. "You love her deeply," she said, watching him sketch Adaobi's sleeping form on cardboard. "More than life," he whispered. "Then tell her who you are," Mama Nkechi pressed. Chuka's pencil paused. "Not yet. If I tell her too early, it will change the way she loves me." The older woman nodded slowly. "Just don't wait until it's too late. Secrets have expiry dates." Chuka stared into the darkness, haunted. He had cut himself off from his billionaire father 10 years ago, choosing a life of struggle over being used as a puppet in boardroom politics. But now, watching Adaobi suffer, bleed, sweat, cry, for him, he began to wonder if pride was worth the pain. As the moon rose, Chuka looked at her again and whispered, "Soon, my love. The truth will come. But not like this. It must be when you're ready to rise, not when we're still on our knees." Chuka hadn't always been Chuka the roadside artist. 10 years ago, he was known as Chukwuebuka Ikenadike, the only son of Chief Damien Dike, Nigeria's wealthiest CEO and owner of Dike Conglomerates, a multinational empire with hands in oil, tech, and real estate. Born into affluence, Chuka had everything: foreign tutors, vacations in Dubai, a mansion that could swallow 10 streets. But his childhood was lonely. His mother had died, giving birth to him, and his father buried himself in work. Raised by nannies and drivers, Chuka grew up resentful of the life he didn't choose. At 15, he started skipping classes to sketch strangers in parks. His father called it nonsense and demanded he study economics. But Chuka found joy in simplicity, in the faces of people, the sound of Legos, the freedom to just exist. At 21, the final straw came when Chief Dike tried to arrange a political marriage between Chuka and a senator's daughter to seal a business merger. "You will marry her, and you will take over the company. That's your duty," his father declared. But Chuka refused. "I'm not your pawn. I want to live, not rule." After a heated argument that ended with broken glass and bitter words, Chuka packed a bag, left the mansion, and vanished. For months, his face flooded TV stations and newspapers. "Billionaire's son missing." But he had burned his ID, changed his clothes, and began life again in obscurity, drawing for food, living in abandoned buildings. He found peace in anonymity. Over time, the world forgot him. His father, angry and hurt, moved on. But secretly, he never stopped searching. Now, sitting beside a flickering kerosene lamp, Chuka glanced at his worn notebook filled with old contact numbers and photos. Among them was one photo of his father holding a young Chuka, the only smile they ever shared. Chuka sighed, flipping the page. "I left to find my own life," he muttered. "And I found her." Adaobi, in her suffering and grace, had become his entire world. But even love couldn't hide the looming fear that his past would eventually catch up. Unknown to him, it already had. Chief Dike had recently hired a new private investigator with one mission: find Chuka before the company's annual board vote, which required Chuka's signature to approve a billion-naira expansion. And this time, they were closing in fast. The streets of Lagos were about to witness a reunion that would shake the foundations of power, pride, and love. It started as a mild cough, then headaches, then vomiting. Adaobi thought it was just exhaustion, maybe food poisoning, but by the third night, she collapsed while frying akra. Mama Nkechi screamed as Chuka rushed to her side, lifting her limp body, her skin clammy and pale. They had no car, no money for a real hospital, and the nearest clinic demanded a deposit they couldn't afford. "She needs 4 fluids urgently," the nurse barked. "Go and find money, or take her elsewhere." Chuka ran from shop to shop, begging, sketching portraits on the spot, doing anything to raise the money. He sold his drawing pencils, his only shoes, even his last watch, all to save her. By nightfall, they managed to get her admitted to a nearby local clinic with cracked walls and flickering lights. As she lay unconscious on the rusted hospital bed, Chuka held her hand and whispered, "Please don't leave me. Not you." For 2 days, Adaobi floated between life and death. Her fever climbed, so high the nurses feared brain damage. Chuka barely slept, his eyes red, his voice hoarse from praying. He remembered their first conversation, her smile, her courage, her refusal to let poverty kill her spirit. He blamed himself. If I had told her who I am, she wouldn't be suffering like this, he whispered. If I had just gone back and brought her to my father's estate, but he had vowed to only bring her into that world when she stood tall, not as a charity case. Now he questioned that decision. Mama Nkechi sat with him, tears in her eyes. You love her like breath itself. Don't let your pride kill her. If you have anyone you can call, do it now. Chuka didn't respond. But that night, while everyone slept, he pulled out his notebook, flipped to the number he had avoided for a decade, and dialed. It rang once, twice. Then a deep voice answered. Hello. Chuka's throat tightened. It's me, he said hoarsely. Silence. Chukwubuka, the voice asked. Where are you? Chuka hesitated, then finally said, I need your help. She's dying. On the other end, Chief Dyke stood frozen in his glass tower, stunned. For 10 years, he had waited for this moment. Send me the location, he said, without hesitation. Within hours, helicopters were being arranged, doctors mobilized, and a convoy of black SUVs rolled through the streets of Lagos. By dawn, the slums would witness an event unlike any they had seen before, not knowing that the sleeping girl in a rundown clinic was about to be rescued by the empire that once lost its only son. Chief Damien Dyke stood on the rooftop helipad of his Victoria Island skyscraper as his private helicopter roared to life. Dressed in a sharp gray bata with a black velvet cap tilted slightly, he was a man whose name made powerful men stand at attention. But tonight, the ever-cold and calculated tycoon had a tremor in his hand. He finally called. He whispered to his personal assistant, Uchenna. After 10 years, he called because of a woman. Uchenna nodded silently, signaling the pilot to prepare for takeoff. Behind them, a convoy of security and medical teams waited with precision. Within minutes, they were airborne, cutting through the Lagos night like a blade. Inside the chopper, Chief Dyke stared out into the city lights, memories of his son flooding his mind. The last argument, the stormy departure, the silence that followed. You were always too much like your mother, he murmured. Soft, principled. And yet, tonight, it was that softness that reached out across time and pain. His son was somewhere in the slums, broken yet brave enough to make a desperate call. And Chief Dyke, powerful, feared, and wealthy, had dropped everything to come running. Elsewhere in the dim clinic tucked between cracked walls and a leaking roof, Adaobi's fever had worsened. The old nurse wiped her forehead, whispering prayers. Chuka hadn't left her side, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling. He didn't care about the whispers around him or the pitying looks. She means everything, he repeated, almost like a chant. Then suddenly, a loud rush of wind and dust blasted through the small compound. A blinding light poured through the broken windows as the rotors of a descending helicopter filled the air. People screamed and ran outside. Chuka stood up in shock. He hadn't expected this. Not this fast. Not like this. Moments later, four sharply dressed bodyguards entered with urgency. We are looking for Mr. Chukwubuka Dyke, one announced. Everyone turned. The nurse nearly dropped her tray. Chuka stepped forward. I'm him. The guard bowed. Your father is outside. He's here to take you and the young lady to safety. The clinic's rusty doors burst open, and Chief Dyke entered. For a second, father and son stared at each other. Time froze. Then, without a word, Chuka stepped aside, revealing Adaobi's weak frame on the bed. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow. Chief Dyke's face changed. Get her into the helicopter now, he commanded. A stretcher was brought in. Nurses scrambled. In the chaos, Chuka reached out and touched his father's shoulder for the first time in a decade. Please save her, he said. Chief Dyke nodded, his voice cracking. I will. As Adaobi was wheeled out and the crowd watched in awe, the entire slum buzzed with disbelief. A homeless man, who had eaten from the gutters, was the son of Nigeria's most powerful man. And now, the world would never look at him the same again. The ride to the hospital was tense. Adaobi was unconscious, strapped to machines, while Chuka sat beside her, holding her hand. Chief Dyke sat across from them, observing. The man who once barked orders now sat quietly, watching his son, this grown man who had survived the streets, who had loved a woman fiercely enough to crawl back to the father he swore to never need. When the helicopter landed on the rooftop of Dyke Royal Hospital, the most elite medical center in West Africa, Adaobi was wheeled into the VIP emergency unit while the press tried to flood the gates. "Tell the media nothing," Chief Dyke ordered. "Not until she's stable." Inside the hospital, a team of top doctors worked for hours. Chuka waited outside, pacing like a madman. He barely noticed the luxury around him: the marble floors, gold-trimmed ceilings, and sparkling chandeliers. All he could think about was her smile, and what it would mean if he lost her. After what felt like eternity, the head doctor stepped out. "She's stable," he said, "but she's pregnant." The words hit Chuka like a truck. "Pregnant," he whispered, collapsing into a nearby chair. The doctor nodded. "Early stages. She likely didn't know yet. We've started her on supplements. She needs rest." Chuka wept, silent tears of relief and guilt. Chief Dyke stood beside him. "That girl, she must mean everything to you," he said softly. Chuka looked at his father, his eyes burning. "She's my whole life. And I chose her. Not your world, not your billions. Her." Chief Dyke nodded. "And yet, your love for her brought you back to the very world you hated." Chuka stood. "I came for her, not for you." The old man didn't flinch. "Still, you're my son. And you're the only one who can take over when I'm gone." Chuka stepped back. "I'm not ready. I haven't forgiven you." Chief Dyke's voice cracked. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I never stopped looking. Not one day. I built this empire for you. All of it." Chuka turned away, the walls closing in. He couldn't hate this man the way he wanted to. And yet, the wounds ran deep. "I'll stay until she recovers," he said coldly. "But after that, we'll see." That night, he slept in the hospital chair beside Adaobi. When she opened her eyes the next morning, weak and confused, Chuka whispered, "You're safe, my love. And you're going to be a mother." She blinked in disbelief, her hand trembling. How are we here?" Chuka kissed her fingers. "Because I finally told the truth. I'm the son of the richest man in the country. And I would have let the whole world burn just to keep you alive." News of Adaobi's condition and her connection to the Dyke Empire leaked like wildfire. Within 24 hours, gossip blogs, Twitter threads, and national newspapers were ablaze with headlines. "Homeless artist revealed as billionaire heir. From slum to empire, Adaobi's rise. Rejected daughter-in-law of elite family, now future CEO's wife." The spotlight burned hotter than ever. Journalists camped outside the hospital. Reporters hunted down Adaobi's parents, shoving cameras in their faces. Chief Maduka shoved a cameraman and yelled, "No comment." Ngozi collapsed when she saw the headline. She married the richest heir in Nigeria. And we threw her away. Her phone rang nonstop with calls from disgraced friends and mocking socialites. Shame began to claw at their pride. Meanwhile, inside the hospital suite, Adaobi struggled to come to terms with everything. She stared at the 4 lines in her arms, her growing belly, and the mansion-like hospital room with more luxury than she'd ever dreamed. "It's all too much," she whispered one morning. "One minute I'm scrubbing plates, next I'm in silk gowns." Chuka held her close. "We're still us. Nothing changes who we are inside." But not all that glittered was gold. Adaobi's pregnancy brought complications. Doctors warned of low blood pressure and stress-related risks. "She needs peace," they advised. But peace was scarce. The media frenzy, the pressure from Chuka's father to return home, the emotional trauma of being disowned, it all weighed heavily. Adaobi began to have nightmares, waking up screaming about being chased through the market, about being left alone again. Chuka hired private therapists and nutritionists, but what Adaobi needed most was closure. One night, she broke down. "I need to see my mother. I need to know if she ever loved me." Chuka hesitated. "She doesn't deserve you." Adaobi shook her head. "But I need to know, Chuka. For our child's sake. I don't want to raise a baby with bitterness in my heart." And so, plans began to bring Ngozi to the hospital, unaware that what awaited them wasn't just a tearful reunion, but a dramatic confrontation that would reopen old wounds, and maybe, just maybe, start to heal them too. Ngozi paced the floor of her bedroom like a caged animal, her fingers trembling as she clutched a copy of the latest Cityscope magazine, Adaobi's face on the cover, glowing beside the headline, From Slum Wife to Billionaire's Queen. Her heart pounded. Regret gripped her throat tighter than pride ever did. Just months ago, she had spat on her daughter's love for a so-called homeless man, and now the same girl was trending across the country as the future matriarch of the Dyke Empire. Her husband, Chief Maduka, buried himself in silence, refusing to watch the news. The shame was unbearable. Their phones had stopped ringing with invitations and started buzzing with taunts. Old friends began ghosting them, and whispers followed them everywhere they went. But Ngozi couldn't shake the haunting images of her daughter living in filth, collapsing, almost dying, all because they pushed her away. "What kind of mother am I?" she whispered to herself in the mirror. The reflection that stared back had no answers. 2 days later, hiding her face beneath a scarf and sunglasses, Ngozi entered the Grand Private Hospital with trembling legs. Chuka had arranged for her to come, reluctantly, at Adaobi's request. When the door to Adaobi's suite opened, Ngozi stood frozen at the entrance. The girl who once knelt to beg for approval now sat like royalty on silk bedsheets, a nurse massaging her feet while another checked her vitals. Adaobi's face was thinner, her eyes deeper, but her spirit, it shone with quiet power. "Mummy," she said, her voice shaking. Ngozi dropped her bag, rushed in, and collapsed by the bed. "My baby, my Adaobi. I was wrong," she wept. "Forgive me. I let my pride destroy everything. I was blind. I was wicked. I didn't protect you." Adaobi stared at her mother, unmoved at first. "You didn't just disown me. You erased me," she said, her voice hard. "Do you know how many nights I thought I'd die in the gutter and no one would notice?" Ngozi sobbed harder. "I failed you. I don't deserve forgiveness. But please, let me be part of your life again. Let me make this right." There was silence. The tension between mother and daughter swirled like a storm. Finally, Adaobi exhaled deeply. "I'll forgive you, but not today. And not because you're crying. I'll forgive you because I'm a mother now, and I don't want to raise my child with hate in my heart." Ngozi lifted her head slowly. You're pregnant?" Adaobi nodded. "And I'll raise this baby to know love, not control. To know peace, not power." Ngozi reached out, trembling, and placed a hand on Adaobi's belly. A tear slipped down Adaobi's cheek. She didn't embrace her mother, not yet. But in that small, fragile moment, something shifted. The wall of betrayal cracked just slightly, and for the first time in months, mother and daughter sat together without shouting, without shame. Just two broken women trying to find their way back to each other before it was too late. 2 weeks later, Adaobi insisted on leaving the hospital. "I can't breathe in this golden cage," she told Chuka. "I need to see where we came from before I step into where we're going." Reluctantly, he agreed. They returned to Mama Nkechi's buka, not to live, but to visit. The entire slum erupted in celebration. People who once mocked them now danced with joy, neighbors offered gifts, and children sang songs of Adaobi's strength. Mama Nkechi hugged her like a long-lost daughter. "You look like a queen, but your soul never changed," she said, teary-eyed. Adaobi donated funds to renovate the buka and open a free clinic nearby. But as the sun dipped low that evening, Adaobi clutched her belly and screamed. Her water had broken. Panic spread. "We need to get her to a hospital," Chuka yelled. But their car was stuck in traffic far away, and the roads were too narrow for emergency vehicles. Rain began to fall. They carried Adaobi into a nearby compound, cleared a room, and laid her on a makeshift bed. Chuka held her hand, tears falling as she cried out in pain. "I'm here, my love. I'm here," he whispered, wiping her forehead. Mama Nkechi boiled water and fetched clean towels, while another woman with some experience in birthing stepped in to help. "Push," the woman shouted. "You can do it, Adaobi." The storm outside grew louder, the rain drumming against the zinc roof like war drums. Chuka whispered prayers between gasps of panic. Adaobi's screams pierced the night. Sweat poured down her face, her body trembling. "I can't," she sobbed. "It's too much. But Chuka looked into her eyes and whispered, "You've survived worse. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. Bring our child into the world. We need you both." With one final push and a blood-curdling scream, the baby emerged. A loud, healthy cry filled the air. A girl. A beautiful, strong girl. Everyone in the room collapsed into relief and tears. Chuka cut the cord himself, sobbing as he held his daughter for the first time. "You did it," he whispered to Adaobi. "She's here. She's perfect." Adaobi, pale and exhausted, reached out and touched her baby's cheek. "Zena," she said. "Her name is Zena. It means secret." Chuka laughed through tears. "Because love like this, it was our secret gift from heaven." Outside, the slum people gathered, clapping, singing, dancing in the rain. A girl who had been thrown away had just brought life into the world in their midst. And little did they know, that baby girl would one day sit on a throne built not of gold, but of resilience, truth, and love that refused to die in the face of rejection. 3 days later, Chief Dyke arrived in the slum in person, flanked by a dozen black SUVs and private security. He stepped out of his car in a polished ibada and leather loafers, but the moment he saw Chuka holding Adaobi and the baby in front of Mama Nkechi's buka, his expression softened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he walked slowly toward them, the rain still fresh on the ground, the scent of smoke and jollof in the air. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. Chuka nodded. "Her name is Zena." Chief Dyke knelt, a billionaire, a tycoon, a man never seen, without control, and kissed his granddaughter's forehead. "Welcome to the family," he whispered. Then he looked at Adaobi, his voice lower. "I failed my son. I won't fail his daughter. Come home. All of you." Adaobi's lips quivered. "This place, this community, saved me when no one else would." Chief Dyke nodded. "Then let us honor them. Let the world see where strength was born." That same week, the slum was flooded with construction trucks, architects, and donors. Chief Dyke began building a modern school, a maternity clinic, and several apartment blocks, all in Adaobi's name. "Let it be called the Adaobi Foundation for the Forgotten," he declared. His media team spread the news nationwide. For the first time, the elite began to look toward the slums not with contempt but curiosity and admiration. Adaobi, once mocked, now stood as a symbol of grace. Within days of the slum celebration, life took on a surreal glow. Adaobi and her newborn daughter, Zena, had become a national sensation, not for fame, but for inspiration. Still recovering from childbirth, Adaobi was seated in a borrowed plastic chair with Zena in her arms, surrounded by children who sang songs of hope and love. But the moment was interrupted by the now familiar thunder of helicopter blades cutting through the air. The compound erupted in gasps and cheers as a sleek black helicopter descended slowly into the same slum where Adaobi once begged for water and food. Only this time, she wasn't being rescued from sickness or pain. She was being celebrated. As the chopper's doors opened, Chief Dyke himself stepped out, followed by a team of government officials and members of his foundation board. The media had been banned. This moment wasn't for the cameras. It was for history. Chuka lifted Adaobi gently, holding her close, while Mama Nkechi carried baby Zena wrapped in a lace cloth. The people formed a human corridor, cheering, crying, clapping. "You made it, Adaobi. You made it," someone shouted. She waved through tears, her voice breaking. "We made it." She walked past the rusty stalls, the gutters, the cracked walls, each holding memories of hunger, loss, and perseverance. As she boarded the helicopter with Chuka and Zena, the wind from the blades stirred the dust, whipping through the faces of those who once mocked her and those who saved her. "Don't forget us," Mama Nkechi whispered with teary pride. Adaobi smiled. "I'll never forget. You gave me life when even my own blood turned away." The helicopter ascended into the sky, and the slum slowly shrank below, but the legacy that began there was only beginning to take flight. They landed at the Dyke Mansion, a vast, palatial estate Adaobi had only seen in magazines. Marble pillars, fountains, manicured gardens, and servants who bowed at every corner. But none of it dazzled her. What mattered was Zina in her arms, Chuka by her side, and the fact that they had survived the kind of pain that could break the soul. That night, in a grand golden nursery prepared for Zina, Chuka wrapped his arms around Adaobi and whispered, "You've always been royalty, Adaobi." They just didn't see it. Now the whole world does. She rested her head against his chest and replied, "It wasn't the wealth or the mansion that saved me. It was your love, and the belief that something beautiful could come from brokenness." In that quiet, candlelit room, they held each other, no longer as survivors, but as conquerors. And though the mansion sparkled with luxury, it was their hearts that shone the brightest. The next morning, a press conference was held inside the Dyke headquarters. The media world had been buzzing for days with rumors, speculation, and blurry images of Adaobi's dramatic rescue. Chief Dyke stood beside Chuka, Adaobi, and baby Zina as the cameras flashed and microphones extended. "Today," Chief Dyke began, "I reintroduce my son, Chukwuebuka Ikena Dyke, to the world. A man of integrity, resilience, and courage." The crowd murmured. 10 years ago, he left us to find himself. And I won't lie, I resented it. But what I see now is a man who left a palace to understand the people, who chose love over inheritance, who earned his legacy through scars, not privilege. And this woman, he gestured to Adaobi, who stood tall beside her husband, is not just his wife. She is the heart of our family, the soul of our future, and the reason our empire will endure with purpose. Adaobi stepped up to the microphone, her voice calm, her heart thunderous. "I was disowned, mocked, and cast out because I chose love over convenience. And while the world laughed, we endured. We slept in gutters, ate once a day, and were forgotten by everyone except a few kind souls. But here we stand, not as victims, but as survivors. And to every woman out there who has been told she's only worth what a man can give her, hear me clearly. You are more. You are powerful. And if you ever find yourself in the mud, use it to grow your roots, not bury your dreams." The hall exploded in applause. The moment went viral instantly. Hashtags like #AdaobiRises and #From Slum to Palace trended worldwide. That day, Adaobi became more than a wife. She became a voice for strength, dignity, and transformation. That same evening, Chief Maduka and Ngozi sat in their dimmed living room, glued to the TV in stunned silence. They had said nothing since the press conference started. Not a word, not a breath. Just the cold sting of guilt tightening around their necks. "She spoke like a queen," Ngozi whispered. Chief Maduka wiped a tear from his eye, the first in years. "And we treated her like trash." It wasn't just shame they felt. It was the realization that they had thrown away a jewel, a daughter who had now become a national icon. And they had done it willingly, proudly. But deep inside, something cracked open. The weight of their pride, which had always stood like a fortress, began to crumble. Adaobi had risen, and they were left behind in the ruins of their own decisions. The fallout was swift and brutal. Journalists dug up old videos of Chief Maduka boasting about how he had no daughter married to a beggar. Old social media posts by Adaobi's cousins mocking her lifestyle resurfaced. Within days, major contracts were canceled. Society events withdrew their invitations, and political allies distanced themselves from Adaobi's parents. Even church elders began to question the kind of example Chief Maduka had set. Ngozi, once a celebrated woman's leader and fashion icon, could no longer walk into her favorite salon without whispers following her like a shadow. She cried herself to sleep most nights, staring at the photos of Adaobi on magazine covers, smiling with the granddaughter she hadn't held. "We disowned her," she whispered. "We disowned her, and she rose." And the pain wasn't just social, it was spiritual. The very people they had once looked down on now looked down on them. Meanwhile, Chuka and Adaobi watched the downfall from afar, torn between justice and mercy. "They're being punished," Chuka said, "but it doesn't make me happy." Adaobi nodded quietly. "It never does. Revenge tastes sweet only to those who've never bled." Despite everything, Adaobi reached out to her parents through a private message. "I am not angry," she wrote, "but I am changed. I forgive you, but I am not the same daughter you once knew. If you wish to be part of Zena's life, you must come with humility, not expectations." The message was short, but it hit like thunder. Chief Maduka sat with the letter in his lap for hours. Eventually, he walked to his wife and said, "We're going to kneel. Before our daughter. Before our shame. Before God." And that day marked the beginning of their slow, painful redemption. The public watched as a humble Chief Maduka and Ngozi appeared at a charity event hosted by Adaobi's foundation. They arrived in plain clothes, without guards or heirs, and waited quietly in the back. When Adaobi stepped on stage and saw them, the crowd hushed. Cameras turned. People waited for drama. But Adaobi simply walked down, took her mother's hand, looked her father in the eye, and whispered, "Welcome." And that one word, simple, gentle, undeserved, brought both of them to tears. They dropped to their knees before her in front of the world. Adaobi pulled them up and embraced them. The audience exploded in applause. Forgiveness had triumphed. Not for show, but for healing. Because love in its purest form doesn't forget, it chooses to rise above. Weeks after the emotional reunion, Adaobi stood before a crowd of global investors, philanthropists, and high-ranking government officials at the grand opening of the Adaobi Foundation headquarters in Abuja. Clad in a regal white dress tailored with traditional embroidery, she looked every inch a queen, not because of the luxury that surrounded her, but because of the quiet fire in her eyes. Her journey, once littered with scorn and suffering, had now transformed into a national symbol of hope. Her speech that afternoon wasn't filled with lofty business terms or economic jargon. It was raw, human, and powerful. "I'm not standing here because I married wealth," she said boldly. "I'm standing here because I didn't let pain turn me bitter. I let it shape me." She spoke of the girl who once begged for water, the woman who gave birth in a slum, and the mother who forgave those who betrayed her. And when she spoke of Zena, her miracle born in the mud, the entire hall stood and applauded. Under her leadership, the Adaobi Foundation quickly became one of the fastest-growing charitable organizations in Nigeria. With Chuka's artistic vision and Chief Dyke's resources, they began to fund educational scholarships, slum redevelopment projects, and medical outreach programs in underserved areas. But Adaobi refused to let it become another elitist institution. She visited every site herself, hugged widows with dusty hands, knelt beside children in torn uniforms, and sat with women in maternity wards just like the one where she almost died. Her authenticity drew people in. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply giving back what the streets had given her: resilience, clarity, and perspective. For the first time in a long time, the rich listened, the poor felt seen, and Adaobi became a bridge between two worlds that rarely touched. But not everyone cheered. Behind the scenes, whispers began to rise from threatened elites and jealous rivals who saw her as a disruptor. "She's too influential," some muttered. "What if she runs for office?" But Adaobi ignored the noise. Her focus remained on legacy, not power. One night, as she stood on the rooftop of the Dyke estate looking over the city lights, Chuka wrapped his arms around her. "You've become everything they said you could never be," he whispered. "And more." She turned to him, her voice soft but sure. "I didn't rise alone. You carried me when I was broken, and Zena gave me the strength to rise again." That night, as they held each other under the stars, neither of them realized that history books were already being rewritten, with her name etched not just in gold, but in the hearts of a nation. Despite everything they had been through, the street struggles, the near-death experiences, the rejection and redemption, Chuka and Adaobi had never truly celebrated their love. Their first marriage was marked by whispered vows in a leaking corner of a slum. There were no guests, no rings, no family, just promises. But now, with everything behind them and a future paved with love and purpose, Chief Dyke proposed a grand celebration, not just for prestige, but to honor the love that defied all odds. Adaobi hesitated at first. "We've already married where it mattered," she said. But Chuka smiled. "Let's show Zena that dreams do come true, no matter where they begin." So the preparations began. The wedding became the most anticipated event of the year. Guests flew in from all over the world, dignitaries, celebrities, and ordinary people inspired by Adaobi's journey. But she insisted the guest list include Mom and Nkechi, the midwife from the slum, the children from the market school she built, and even the cleaner who once gave her paracetamol at the clinic. The wedding venue? A fusion of elegance and heritage. A majestic open-air garden decorated with flowers and fabrics from every region of Nigeria. Adaobi walked down the aisle in a custom-made dress that blended silk with ankara, symbolizing her journey from royalty to reality and back. Zina, dressed in matching white lace, was carried by Chuka's mother's surviving sister, who had wept at finally meeting the woman who gave her nephew reason to return. As Chuka stood waiting, tears filled his eyes, not because of the grandeur, but because of the woman walking toward him. Adaobi, his best friend, his fighter, his peace. When she reached him, they held hands, eyes locked. The officiant began, but no one really heard the words. It was the silence between them that spoke the loudest. When they exchanged vows, they didn't promise perfection. They promised presence. They promised truth. They promised to remember the gutter even while walking on gold. When they kissed, the crowd erupted. Fireworks lit the sky, choirs sang in native tongues, and for the first time in years, everyone who had known pain felt like something beautiful had finally won. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a declaration that love, real gritty, tested love, could still conquer all. The week after the wedding was filled with celebration, interviews, and reflection. But Adaobi knew she had one final chapter to close, the one involving her parents. Though the public had seen their emotional kneeling and brief reconciliation, Adaobi hadn't fully opened the door yet. She had forgiven them, yes. But trust? That had to be earned. One morning, she invited them for breakfast at her new home, a warm, sunlit space with both luxury and the humility of her taste. She greeted them with a quiet grace, seated across the table with Zina bouncing gently on her lap. Chief Maduka and Ngozi arrived dressed simply, eyes filled with both hope and fear. "Thank you for inviting us," her father began. Adaobi nodded, but went straight to the point. "I've forgiven you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." She continued, "I need you to understand something. My daughter will never be taught to look down on anyone. She will not grow up in a world of judgment and class obsession. If you're going to be part of her life, it has to be on terms of love, not expectation. And if she ever feels unloved or unworthy in your presence, I won't hesitate to walk away again." Her words were sharp, but not bitter. They were spoken from a healed heart setting boundaries. Her mother wept quietly. "We understand. We want to know her. Even if it's a little. Even if we have to earn it daily." Adaobi looked at her daughter, then back at her parents. "Then let's begin. Slowly. Deliberately. With honesty." Over the next weeks, Adaobi's parents began to visit regularly, no longer as elites, but as grandparents learning to rebuild trust brick by brick. Her father, once too proud to bow, now sat on the floor playing with Zina's toys. Her mother helped cook jollof in the kitchen, asking Adaobi questions about how to blend herbs for her postpartum soups. They laughed. They cried. They made mistakes. But every day, they tried. And for Adaobi, that was enough. Because healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing every single day to build something new from the ruins. And in this case, they were building something stronger than what was destroyed, a family bound by truth, shaped by pain, and destined for love. The sun rose gently over Lagos, casting a warm golden hue across the skyline. From the balcony of their modest but elegant villa, nestled in a quiet, leafy suburb far from the chaos of the Dyke estate, Adaobi stood barefoot, watching Zina toddle across the grass. It had been over a year since the dramatic wedding, since forgiveness reshaped old wounds, since slum life was traded for legacy. But despite the wealth that now surrounded her, Adaobi had chosen not to return to the cold, extravagant mansion of the Dyke family. She wanted her daughter raised in warmth, in balance, with values that didn't come from status, but from compassion. "Mummy," Zina giggled, holding up a dandelion she'd picked. Adaobi knelt and kissed her. "You are the flower I thought I'd never see bloom," she whispered. In the distance, Chuka was loading crates into a van for a mobile art workshop in Ajagunal, a program he had founded to teach underprivileged kids how to tell their stories through art. Their lives had come full circle, from broken beginnings to lives now lived in service, love, and purpose. Every week, Adaobi hosted counseling groups for disowned daughters, struggling mothers, and former street girls. She never judged them. She simply listened. She had become a symbol, not a celebrity, but a sister to the forgotten. Her face appeared on the covers of magazines, yes, but she always redirected the spotlight back to her mission. "Your pain can be your passport," she often said in interviews. "If you survive the fire, don't just rebuild the house. Teach others how to walk through the flames." Mama Nkechi became the official head of the foundation's Women's Empowerment Wing. Chuka's foundation built 6 new art centers across the country. And Chief Dyke, older and slower now, often visited quietly just to hold his granddaughter and apologize again for the years lost to pride. Adaobi never withheld access to Zina, but she never let history repeat itself either. She had boundaries, but she also had grace. Because she knew, perhaps more than anyone, that redemption wasn't a destination. It was a daily choice. One crisp Sunday morning, Adaobi stood before a crowd gathered under a tent in the same slum where her journey had begun. Behind her stood the newly completed Zina Memorial Women's Hospital, named in honor of her daughter's miraculous birth and the countless women who had died giving life in forgotten corners of the city. The same streets that once mocked her now applauded her. The same gutters she once cried into were now covered with flowers and murals. Her parents sat in the front row. Mama Nkechi wept silently. Chuka stood by her side, smiling with quiet pride. And as Adaobi raised the ribbon-cutting scissors in her hand, she paused and looked around. "I once thought I had lost everything," she said, voice steady. "But God doesn't destroy what He wants to elevate. He breaks it, rebuilds it, and if you trust Him, He will write your story in ways that no one, not even your enemies, can erase." The crowd roared. Zina clapped, too, mimicking them. And in that moment, surrounded by old pain and new purpose, Adaobi realized she was no longer the girl begging for love. She was a woman overflowing with it. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel Tales by TOCHI for more.